pettiest thing someone's ever done to steal your dream? My theater director Gerald grabbed my arm backstage and pulled me toward the exit door while I was midline rehearsal. You're out of the Jefferson scene. Also, the garden monologue. I yanked my arm back. What? Don't play dumb. His face was red. 3 people came to me today. 3 separate complaints about your attitude. What attitude? I've been here early every single rehearsal. You told the costume designer her work was garbage. You refused blocking notes from me twice. You showed up 30 minutes late on Tuesday and didn't apologize. None of that happened. Not one word of it. Gerald, I don't want to hear it. He held up his hand. I gave you this role because I thought you were professional. Clearly, I was wrong. 2 scenes gone. If I get one more complaint, you're out entirely. He walked away before I could defend myself. I turned around and Brendan Cole was standing 6 feet behind me, close enough that he'd heard everything. He had his script open like he'd been running lines, but his eyes were locked on mine. Rough day? He asked. My throat closed up. Did you hear what he just said to me? Some of it. Brendan stepped closer. Look, I don't know what's going on with you and Gerald, but maybe just apologize? Theater politics are brutal. It's easier to just smooth things over. I didn't do anything. Right, yeah. He nodded too quickly. I'm just saying, that's what everyone's hearing. And perception is reality in this business. Everyone's hearing what? Brendan glanced past me toward the stage where Olivia and 2 other ensemble members were suddenly very focused on their phones. Just, talk. What talk? I don't want to get in the middle of it. He backed away. But maybe watch your tone with people? Gerald's not the kind of director who tolerates drama. He walked toward the stage. I stood there with my script shaking in my hands, reading the same blocked scene that Gerald had just erased. Brendan took his position under the lights, right where my garden monologue was supposed to transition into his response scene. Without my scene, his part would run twice as long. Without my scene, the audience would remember his performance instead of mine. The stage manager called places and nobody looked at me. Olivia moved to the other side of the backstage area. The lighting tech suddenly needed to adjust something in the booth. Even Jeremy, who'd been joking with me about our terrible coffee habit every morning for 2 weeks, found a reason to check the prop table on the opposite end of the theater. Brendan delivered his first line from center stage, his voice carrying perfectly to the back row. He'd been complaining since day one that his role was too small, that he deserved more time in the spotlight, that Gerald was making a mistake with the scene order. Now he was getting exactly what he wanted, and I was the one paying for it. Gerald called cut and gave Brendan notes. Actual constructive notes about pacing and projection, the kind of notes I used to get before today. I looked down at my script. 2 scenes crossed out in my head. 6 scenes remaining. And Brendan watching me from the stage with something that wasn't quite sympathy and wasn't quite satisfaction, but lived somewhere perfectly calculated in between. By the next rehearsal, everyone knew. I walked into the theater and the conversation at the prop table died mid-sentence. Olivia grabbed her water bottle and headed for the bathroom. The stage manager suddenly needed to reorganize the equipment closet. Jeremy was the only one who didn't immediately scatter. But when I walked over to ask if he'd heard anything about complaints, he held up both hands. I don't want to get involved in cast drama. He backed toward the stage. Sorry, I'm not asking you to get involved. I'm asking if you know what people are saying about me. Look, I barely know what's going on myself. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Just maybe give it some time to blow over? He left before I could respond. Gerald posted the revised rehearsal schedule on the call board. My name appeared half as many times as it had yesterday. Brendan's name was everywhere. He'd been given my transition scene in Act 2. Also the ensemble moment in Act 3 where I was supposed to deliver the setup line for the final confrontation. I pulled out my phone and photographed the schedule before anyone could see me doing it. Brendan arrived 20 minutes late with coffee for Gerald and the stage manager. He apologized loudly about traffic and everyone laughed it off. The same director who'd torn into me for imaginary lateness didn't say a word. Hey, Brendan set his bag down next to mine in the backstage area. How are you holding up? Fine. I know this must be hard. He lowered his voice like we were sharing something confidential. But Gerald's actually being pretty reasonable. He could have cut you completely. He cut me based on lies. I mean, if multiple people are saying the same thing, what people? Who complained? Brendan's expression shifted into something that might pass for concern to anyone not paying close attention. I don't think it's helpful to focus on that. He picked up his script. What's helpful is showing everyone you're a team player. Just do the work, be positive, and this'll pass. It won't pass if someone's actively lying about me. Nobody's lying. His voice got quieter, which somehow made it worse. But I get it. It's hard to accept criticism. We all struggle with that sometimes. He walked away before I could argue. Gerald called places for the first run-through of the revised schedule. I had 1 scene in the entire first act now. 1 scene that used to lead into 3 others, all of which had been redistributed to Brendan or cut entirely. I stood in the wings and watched him perform my transition scene with the actress who played the lead. He'd changed some of the blocking, positioned himself further downstage so the lights hit him better. The scene worked. It worked well enough that nobody would remember it used to be mine. The lead actress delivered her line and Brendan responded with perfect timing. Gerald nodded from the audience and made an approving note on his clipboard. Great instincts, Brendan. That's exactly the energy we need. The same director who'd stopped giving me notes 3 days ago. After rehearsal, I tried to catch Olivia in the parking lot. She was one of the few people who'd been friendly before all this started, and I needed someone to tell me what was actually being said. Olivia, wait. She stopped but didn't turn around immediately. Can we talk for a second? I'm kind of in a hurry. This'll be quick. I just need to know what people are saying about me. She finally looked at me. I don't want to make things worse. You won't. I just need to understand what's happening. Olivia glanced back at the theater entrance like someone might be watching. People are saying you've been really negative, that you complained about the costumes and refused to take direction, that you showed up late and made excuses. She spoke quickly, like she wanted the words out and done with. I don't know if it's true, but that's what's going around. None of that's true, not one thing. Okay, she adjusted her bag on her shoulder. But like, multiple people are saying it. So either they're all lying, or she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Who started it? Who said this stuff first? I don't know. It's just what people are talking about. She backed toward her car. Look, I really have to go. Maybe just try to smooth things over with Gerald? That's probably the fastest way to fix this. She drove away before I could explain that you can't smooth over something you didn't do. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, reading through the script and counting how many scenes I'd lost. 4 major scenes, 6 smaller moments. Almost half my role, gone in 2 days. And Brendan had absorbed most of them. The next rehearsal was worse. Gerald announced more changes. My final scene in Act 3, the one where I was supposed to have an emotional moment with the lead, was being streamlined for pacing. Brendan would handle the transition transition into the finale instead. Sorry, Gerald said when he saw me staring at the revised pages. It's what's best for the show. I opened my mouth to argue and caught Brendan watching me from across the stage. He looked away quickly, but not before I saw the calculation in his expression. If I argued, I'd seem difficult. If I stayed quiet, I'd lose another scene. Either way, he won. Gerald dismissed us early to incorporate the changes, which meant Brendan got an extra 30 minutes of blocking rehearsal for his expanded role while I sat in the audience with nothing to do. The lead actress worked through the new transition with him. She laughed at something he said between takes. Gerald gave him notes that were collaborative, almost friendly. I pulled out my phone and started searching for other community theaters, other auditions, any reason to have something after this production inevitably fell apart, but every search just reminded me that I'd been excited about this role. I'd worked for this role, and someone was taking it piece by piece while everyone watched and did nothing. I cornered Gerald in his office the next afternoon before rehearsal started. I need to talk to you about the complaints. He didn't look up from his laptop. I already told you. Who complained? Give me one name. That's not how this works. He closed the laptop. I'm not going to expose people who came to me in confidence. Then how am I supposed to defend myself against accusations I don't even know about? By changing your behavior. His voice had that edge that said the conversation was over. Look, I've heard from multiple cast members, multiple crew members. At a certain point, I have to take that seriously. What did they say specifically? Gerald sighed like I was exhausting him. You've been negative, dismissive of notes, late to calls. You argued with the costume designer about her choices. I never spoke to the costume designer, not once. She said you did? Then she's lying, or someone told her I said something I didn't say. Or you're not remembering the interaction correctly. He stood up. This is exactly what people are talking about. You can't accept feedback. Everything is someone else's fault. Because none of it happened. I have too many complaints to ignore. He moved toward the door. If you want to salvage your role, stop being defensive and start being a team player. He left before I could respond. I stood in his empty office staring at his desk, at the rehearsal schedule with my name crossed out in half the scenes. When I got to the theater, Brendan was already there talking to the costume designer. He saw me and immediately put his hand on her shoulder like they were in the middle of something important. She's so talented, he said loud enough for me to hear. I love what you did with the Act 2 costumes. The costume designer smiled at him, the same woman who'd supposedly complained about me. I walked past them to the backstage area. Brendan followed 30 seconds later. Hey, I know that talk with Gerald was probably rough. He kept his voice low and sympathetic. But he's not trying to punish you. He's trying to protect the production. From what? From lies? From negativity. He glanced around like he was making sure no one could hear. Look, I get it. You're frustrated. But the way you're handling this is just making people more uncomfortable. I'm handling it by asking who's lying about me. See, that's the problem. He shook his head slowly. You keep saying people are lying. But what if they're just sharing their genuine experiences? What if your perception of your behavior doesn't match how it's coming across? My perception? Brendan, I didn't do any of the things I'm being accused of. Okay, he held up both hands. I believe you believe that, but maybe there's a disconnect between intent and impact, you know? He walked away before I could argue. The read-through that night was supposed to be a full run with minimal stops. Gerald wanted to see the new scene order in real time, which meant watching Brendan perform most of the scenes that used to be mine. I had 2 moments in the entire first act. 2 lines that used to transition into full scenes, now reduced to quick beats that barely registered. Brendan delivered his expanded monologue in Act 2 with perfect timing. The cast applauded when he finished. Gerald gave him notes about making one gesture smaller, but praised everything else. That's the energy we need, Gerald said. Everyone else take note of Brendan's commitment. I stared at my script. The monologue he'd just performed used to be preceded by my scene with the lead actress, the scene that established the emotional stakes for his response. Without my scene, his monologue started cold, but he'd adjusted his delivery to compensate and now nobody remembered there'd been anything before it. After rehearsal, I tried one more time to get answers. I approached the costume designer in the hallway. Can I ask you something? She looked nervous immediately. I'm kind of busy. Someone told Gerald I criticized your work. I need to know if you actually said that, or if someone said it to you and you repeated it. I don't want to get in the middle of this. I'm not asking you to get in the middle. I'm asking you to tell the truth. She backed toward the exit. Look, I told Gerald what I heard, okay? I didn't want to cause problems, but when he asked if I'd had any issues with you, I told him what other people had mentioned. What other people? I don't remember exactly. It's just what's going around. She pushed the door open. I'm sorry, I really have to go. She left before I could press further, so she hadn't witnessed anything directly. She'd heard it from someone else and repeated it to Gerald as fact, and Gerald had taken that as a legitimate complaint against me. I sat in my car and pulled out my phone. I'd joined the cast group chat on the first day of rehearsals, back when everyone was excited and friendly. Now the chat was full of inside jokes I wasn't part of and plans I wasn't invited to. I scrolled up through the messages, looking for anything that might show when the rumors started. There was nothing obvious, just a gradual shift in tone. People getting quieter when I posted anything. Conversations moving forward without me. Then I saw it. A message from 3 days ago, right after Gerald had first cut my scenes. Brendan had posted, "Tough rehearsal today. Remember, we're all here to support the show, not our egos." 6 people had liked it, including Gerald. The next rehearsal was worse. Gerald announced another revision. My opening scene in Act 1, the one that established my character's entire motivation, was being absorbed into the ensemble because it slowed down the pacing. It's nothing personal, Gerald said. We're just tightening things up. Brendan would now open the show with the ensemble, and my character would appear later with no introduction. I didn't argue. Arguing had gotten me nowhere. Staying quiet had gotten me nowhere. Nothing I did made any difference because the decision had already been made. Brendan caught up with me backstage after Gerald dismissed us. I know you're upset, he said, but try to see it from Gerald's perspective. He's doing what's best for the show. By cutting my role based on lies? There you go again. He sighed like he was disappointed in me. Nobody's lying. People are just being honest about what they've observed. And the more you push back, the more it confirms what they're saying. Which is what? That you're difficult. He said it gently, like he was trying to help me understand. That you can't handle criticism. That you blame everyone else instead of looking at your own behavior. I'm not difficult. I'm being set up. By who? Everyone? The whole cast is conspiring against you? He lowered his voice. Listen to yourself. That's not rational. He walked away and I stood there with my script, staring at the crossed out scenes, knowing that he was right about one thing. To everyone watching, I looked looked paranoid. I looked like exactly the kind of person who couldn't accept responsibility. And that was the trap. Defend myself and prove them right. Stay silent and lose everything anyway. The stage manager posted the final call sheet for the week. My name appeared twice. Brendan's name appeared in almost every scene. Jeremy walked past me without making eye contact. Olivia pretended to be on her phone. Even the crew members who used to joke around between scene changes found reasons to be on the other side of the stage. Brendan stood center stage, running through blocking with the lead actress. Gerald gave them both notes, collaborative and encouraging. I packed up my script and left early. Nobody noticed. The next rehearsal started with Gerald calling everyone to the stage for an announcement. We're making one more adjustment to the lineup. He didn't look at me. After reviewing the pacing, we're cutting the library scene entirely. It's slowing down Act 2. The library scene was my last substantial moment in the show. 3 pages of dialogue where my character confronted the lead about a betrayal. It was the emotional center of my entire arc. That scene sets up the finale, I said. We'll establish that in other ways. Gerald turned to Brendan. You'll pick up the transition line and carry it into your next scene. Brendan nodded like he'd been expecting this, like maybe he had. I looked around the stage. Nobody met my eyes. Olivia studied her script. Jeremy found something fascinating about his shoes. Can we at least try it with the scene still in? The decision's made. Gerald's voice had that finality that meant arguing would only make things worse. Let's move on. I stood there while the cast dispersed to their places for the run-through. Brendan walked past me, close enough that his shoulder almost brushed mine. Sorry about your scene, he said quietly, but the show has to come first, right? He took his position center stage before I could respond. The run-through was a disaster. For me, anyway. Everyone else was fine. I had one scene in Act 1, a brief moment in Act 2, and a 3-line appearance in Act 3. The show that I'd auditioned for, that I'd spent a month preparing for, had been reduced to barely enough stage time to qualify as a role. Brendan, meanwhile, carried half the show. His scenes flowed smoothly into each other, and Gerald praised his pacing, his choices, his instincts. The cast laughed at his ad-libbed jokes during breaks. The crew made adjustments to give his scenes better lighting. After the run-through, I overheard 2 crew members talking by the tech booth. She seems fine to me, one of them said. I don't get what everyone's complaining about. Yeah, but if that many people are saying something, there's probably truth to it, the other one shrugged. Plus, Brendan's carrying the show anyway. Why create problems? I walked past them toward the exit. They stopped talking immediately. In the parking lot, I found Jeremy loading props into his car. He'd been the closest thing I had to a friend in the cast. Someone who'd actually seemed to enjoy the rehearsal process before everything fell apart. Jeremy, can I talk to you for a second? He closed his trunk without looking at me. I'm kind of in a hurry. This'll be quick. Do you believe what people are saying about me? I don't know what to believe. He finally met my eyes. But I do know that every time someone brings up your name, it's followed by some story about you being difficult or unprofessional. None of those stories are true. Maybe. He unlocked his car. But at this point, does it matter? Gerald believes them. The cast believes them. Fighting it just makes you look worse. So I should just accept losing my role based on lies? I'm saying pick your battles. He opened his door. This show isn't worth destroying your reputation over. Just get through it and move on. He drove away before I could argue that my reputation was already being destroyed, that moving on wasn't an option when someone was actively sabotaging me. I sat in my car and pulled up the cast group chat. Brendan had posted a photo from rehearsal, a shot of him and the lead actress mid-scene. The caption read, "Grateful for this amazing cast. Can't wait for opening night." 12 people had liked it in the 2 minutes since he'd posted. I scrolled through the responses, everyone praising his performance, talking about how excited they were, how the show was coming together better than expected. Nobody mentioned the scenes that had been cut. Nobody mentioned me. The next rehearsal was worse. Gerald pulled me aside before we started. I need to talk to you about your remaining scenes. What about them? The stage manager said you've been showing up late to your call times. I've been here 30 minutes early for every rehearsal. That's not what I'm hearing. He crossed his arms. Look, I'm trying to be patient here, but you're making it very difficult. Who said I was late? Does it matter? Multiple people are telling me the same thing. Yes, it matters, because someone is lying to you. Gerald's expression shifted into something that looked almost like pity. This is what I'm talking about. You can't accept any responsibility. Everything is always someone else's fault. Because it is. I haven't done anything wrong. Then why are so many people saying you have? He walked toward the stage. Last warning, either fix your attitude or you're done. I stood there watching him join the cast for warm-ups. Brendan stood next to Gerald, listening intently as the director explained a blocking change. When Gerald finished, Brendan nodded thoughtfully and said something that made Gerald laugh. The stage manager posted the updated call times on the board. My name appeared at the bottom, scheduled for the end of rehearsal when most of the cast would be gone. Brendan's name was at the top, first call, every day through opening night. During the run-through, I watched from the wings as Brendan performed scene after scene that used to involve me. He'd adjusted his delivery to fill the gaps my cuts had left behind. The show worked. It actually worked, which meant nobody was going to question why I'd been removed from it. The lead actress delivered her final line of Act 2. Brendan's response got applause from Gerald and the crew. Perfect, Gerald called out. That's exactly the energy we need. Let's take 5. Brendan walked off stage and grabbed his water bottle from the props table. He saw me standing in the wings and walked over. You okay? You've been pretty quiet today. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Just seems like you're shutting down. He lowered his voice. Look, I know this has been hard for you, but maybe it's a sign that community theater isn't your thing. Not everyone's cut out for the drama and politics. The only drama is someone spreading lies about me. There you go again, blaming everyone else. He shook his head. You know what? Forget it. I'm trying to help, but you're not interested in hearing it. He walked away and I realized 3 cast members had been close enough to hear our conversation. Close enough to hear me accuse people of lying while Brendan tried to be supportive. I grabbed my script and went outside. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars. I sat on the curb and counted the scenes I had left. 3 scenes, 11 lines total. Nothing that would be remembered after opening night. Inside, I could hear the cast laughing at something. Probably something Brendan said. The crew moved equipment around, adjusting lights for his next scene. My phone buzzed with a message from the stage manager reminding everyone about costume fittings. I'd missed the original scheduling because nobody had told me it was happening. Now I had a fitting scheduled for an hour before anyone else, separate from the cast, like I was being quarantined. I went back inside for my remaining scenes. Gerald gave me exactly one note. Try to match the energy everyone else is bringing. The energy everyone else was bringing didn't include me anymore. I arrived early to the next rehearsal and found the backstage area empty except for two people talking near the prop storage. One of them was Brendan's friend, a guy named Curtis who'd been cast in a minor ensemble role. The other was someone from the crew whose name I'd never learned. Played the director perfectly, Curtis was saying. I mean, Gerald actually believes all of it. I stopped walking. They hadn't seen me yet. Believes what? The crew member asked. That she's difficult. That she's been causing problems. Curtis laughed. Brendan's been feeding him stories for weeks. Made the whole thing up. My hands stopped moving. I stood there behind a rack of costumes, close enough to hear everything. Wait, he made it up? The crew member sounded uncertain. I thought people actually complained. Nah, man. Brendan wanted more stage time, so he started telling Gerald that she was trash-talking the production. Then he got other people to repeat it without them even realizing they were spreading his stories. Curtis laughed again. Gerald cut half her scenes and gave them to Brendan. It's genius, honestly. That's messed up. It's theater. Curtis shrugged. Everyone's competing for stage time. Brendan just played the game better. I stepped back and knocked into a chair. The sound echoed through the backstage area. Curtis turned around. His expression shifted immediately when he saw me. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. I walked toward them. You just said Brendan made everything up. I didn't. I was joking around. Curtis backed toward the exit. You know how it is, just talking. You said he fed Gerald stories, that he made the whole thing up. Look, I don't know what you think you heard. I heard exactly what you said. I pulled out my phone. And I want you to repeat it. I'm not repeating anything. Curtis glanced at the crew member, who was already edging away from the conversation. This is between you and Brendan. Leave me out of it. You're already in it. You just admitted he's been lying to Gerald. I didn't admit anything. Curtis walked toward the stage door. And even if I did, it's your word against mine. He left before I could stop him. The crew member followed without making eye contact. I stood there with my phone in my hand, recording nothing, because I hadn't been fast enough to capture what Curtis said. The first real proof I'd had that someone was sabotaging me, and I'd been too stunned to document it. I went to find Gerald before rehearsal started. He was in the theater office reviewing lighting cues with the stage manager. I need to talk to you. I'm busy right now. I just heard Curtis admit that Brendan's been lying to you, that he made up all the complaints about me. Gerald looked up from his notes. Curtis said that? Yes. He was talking to one of the crew members. He said Brendan wanted more stage time, so he invented stories about me being difficult. And you have proof of this conversation? I heard it directly. I was standing right there. Gerald exchanged a glance with the stage manager. So you overheard something out of context, and now you're accusing Brendan of orchestrating some elaborate conspiracy? It's not out of context. Curtis specifically said Curtis is Brendan's friend. They joke around. Gerald went back to his notes. I'm not making production decisions based on something you think you heard during casual conversation. I know what I heard. You know what you interpreted. He closed his folder. Look, I've tried to be patient, but this is exactly the kind of behavior people have been complaining about. You're looking for conspiracy theories instead of accepting responsibility. Because there is a conspiracy. Curtis just confirmed it. Curtis confirmed nothing. You eavesdropped on a private conversation and decided it supported your narrative. Gerald stood up. Unless you have actual evidence, recordings, messages, something concrete, I don't want to hear it. He walked out before I could respond. I went straight to the stage to find Curtis. He was warming up with the ensemble, laughing at something Olivia said. Curtis, I need you to tell Gerald what you told me. He stopped laughing. I didn't tell you anything. You said Brendan made everything up, that he's been lying to Gerald about me. I was joking. He moved away from me toward the other ensemble members. You took it seriously because you're paranoid. I'm not paranoid. You specifically said he played the director perfectly. I said a lot of things. Doesn't mean they were true. Curtis turned his back to me. Maybe focus on your own performance instead of eavesdropping on private conversations. The other ensemble members watched the exchange. None of them looked sympathetic. I pulled out my phone and opened the cast group chat. I typed out what I'd heard, explaining exactly what Curtis had admitted and how Brendan had been manipulating everyone. I stared at the message for 30 seconds before deleting it. Posting it would look desperate, unhinged, exactly the way Brendan wanted me to look. Brendan arrived 10 minutes later with coffee for Gerald. He saw me standing alone near the stage and walked over. You okay? You look stressed. I know what you've been doing. What are you talking about? Curtis told me. He admitted you made everything up. Brendan's expression didn't change. Curtis says a lot of things, usually as jokes. He wasn't joking. If you say so, Brendan shrugged. But even if he did say something like that, who's going to believe you? You've been accusing everyone of lying for weeks now. At some point, you just sound paranoid. I sound paranoid because you've been gaslighting me. There's that word again. He smiled slightly. You know what's funny? The more you insist everyone's out to get you, the more you prove their point. He walked away toward Gerald, who greeted him warmly and started discussing blocking changes. I stood there and watched them collaborate on adjustments to a scene that used to be mine. Gerald laughed at something Brendan said. The stage manager made notes. Everything moved forward like I wasn't even there. After rehearsal, I caught Curtis in the parking lot before he could get to his car. I need you to tell the truth. I already did. I was joking around. He unlocked his car. You need to let this go. You said Brendan played the director perfectly, that he made up stories to get my scenes cut. Maybe I said something like that. Maybe I didn't. Curtis opened his door. Either way, I'm not getting involved. Brendan's my friend and you're making yourself look crazy. I'm making myself look crazy because your friend has been lying about me for weeks. Then prove it. Curtis got in his car. Find actual evidence. Because right now, all you have is hearsay from a conversation you weren't supposed to hear. He drove away. I sat in my car and pulled up the cast group chat again. I scrolled through weeks of messages, looking for anything that might show Brendan's pattern of manipulation. But he'd been careful. All his messages were supportive, encouraging. Exactly what someone would say if they genuinely cared about the production. The only evidence was what Curtis had said, and Curtis was already denying it. I needed something concrete, something Gerald couldn't dismiss as misinterpretation or paranoia. I opened my messages and scrolled to Curtis's name. We'd exchanged maybe 3 texts total, all production related, nothing personal. I typed, I know you don't want to get involved, but what Brendan did was wrong. If you have any proof, any messages or conversations, I need to see them. I stared at the message for a full minute before hitting send. Curtis read it immediately. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a response came through. I can't help you. Sorry. I threw my phone on the passenger seat and drove home. The next day, I showed up to rehearsal and Curtis wouldn't look at me. Brendan was performing my cut library scene, the one Gerald had removed from the show. Except now it wasn't cut. It was just reassigned. Brendan delivered the confrontation with the lead actress perfectly, hitting every emotional beat I'd spent weeks preparing. Gerald gave him a standing ovation from the audience. I left before the rehearsal ended and sat in my car, staring at my phone. Curtis's message history, the cast group chat, anything that might give me leverage. Then my phone buzzed with a new message. From Curtis. Check your email. I opened my email app. One new message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, what Brendan actually said. I opened it. Inside was a screenshot of a text conversation between Brendan and Curtis from 2 weeks ago. Brendan's message read, Gerald's buying everything I'm telling him. Give it 1 more week and she'll be out completely. More stage time for everyone else. Curtis had sent me proof. I stared at the screenshot for 10 seconds before forwarding it to Gerald with a single line. This is what's actually been happening. I didn't wait for a response. I drove straight to the theater even though rehearsal had ended an hour ago. Gerald's car was still in the parking lot, which meant he was probably in his office finishing paperwork. I walked through the side entrance and found him at his desk, staring at his phone. My email was open on the screen. Is this real? He asked without looking up. Yes, Curtis sent it to me tonight. Gerald zoomed in on the screenshot, reading Brendan's message again. Gerald's buying everything I'm telling him. Give it 1 more week and she'll be out completely. He's been lying to you from the beginning. I stayed in the doorway. Every complaint you heard, every story about me being difficult, he made it all up. Why would Curtis send you this? Because he felt guilty. Because he knows what Brendan did was wrong. Gerald set his phone down. I need to verify this is legitimate. Call Curtis, ask him yourself. He picked up his phone and dialed. I heard it ring twice before Curtis answered. Curtis, it's Gerald. I need you to confirm something. Gerald put the call on speaker. Did Brendan send you a message about manipulating me to cut another cast member's scenes? Silence on the other end. Then Curtis said, yeah, he did. And you sent proof of this to her tonight? I did. Look, I didn't know it would go this far. I thought Brendan was just venting, but then she got cut from like half the show, and I realized he was actually doing it. Curtis's voice was shaking. I should have said something earlier. I'm sorry. How many people know about this? Just me, as far as I know. Brendan kept it pretty quiet. Gerald ended the call and looked at me for the first time since I'd walked in. I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that. You cut my role based on lies. I know. He stood up from his desk. I'll fix this. Tomorrow. I'll call an emergency cast meeting and address this directly. Tomorrow? Brendan's been sabotaging me for weeks and you want to wait until tomorrow? I need time to figure out how to handle this properly. Gerald grabbed his coat. But I promise you he's done, and your role will be fully restored. What about everyone who believed him? What about the cast members who've been treating me like I'm toxic? I'll make it clear that you were wrongly accused, that I made a mistake. He turned off his office light. I can't undo the damage, but I can make sure everyone knows the truth. I left the theater and drove home. I didn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Gerald to change his mind or Brendan to somehow talk his way out of it. The next morning, I got a text from the stage manager. Emergency cast meeting at 2 p.m., attendance mandatory. I arrived 15 minutes early. The theater was already full. Cast and crew members filled the seats, talking quietly among themselves. Brendan sat in the 3rd row, looking relaxed. He saw me walk in and his expression shifted slightly, but he didn't look worried. Gerald walked onto the stage at exactly 2. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I need to address something serious that's come to my attention. He pulled out his phone. Last night, I received evidence that one of our cast members has been deliberately spreading false information about another cast member. The theater went silent. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I made a significant error in judgment. I cut scenes and reduced a role based on complaints that I now know were fabricated. Gerald looked directly at Brendan. Brendan, I need you to come up here. Brendan didn't move. I don't understand what's happening. Yes, you do. Come up here. Brendan stood slowly and walked to the stage. His face was still arranged in confusion, but I saw his jaw tighten. Gerald held up his phone. I have a message you sent to Curtis 2 weeks ago. Would you like me to read it to everyone? I don't know what message you're talking about. You wrote, and I quote, Gerald's buying everything I'm telling him. Give it 1 more week and she'll be out completely. More stage time for everyone else. Gerald lowered his phone. Would you like to explain what that means? Brendan looked at Curtis in the audience. Curtis was staring at his hands. That was taken out of context, Brendan said. Curtis and I joke around a lot. I was being sarcastic. Sarcastic about manipulating me to cut someone's role? I never manipulated you. I reported legitimate concerns that other cast members brought to me. Name one person who brought a concern to you. Gerald crossed his arms. Give me one name of someone who actually complained. Brendan hesitated. I can't violate their confidence. That's convenient. Gerald turned to the audience. Curtis, would you like to share what Brendan told you about this situation? Curtis stood up slowly. He told me he was feeding Gerald stories about her being difficult, that he wanted her scenes cut so he could have more stage time. He said it was working. That's not what I said. Brendan's voice got louder. You're twisting my words. I have the messages, Brendan. Curtis pulled out his phone. I can show everyone else if you want. Brendan's expression finally cracked. This is ridiculous. I've done nothing but try to help this production. By lying about a fellow cast member? Gerald's voice was sharp. By convincing me to cut her role based on fabricated complaints? They weren't fabricated. Other people had issues with her too. Name one. Gerald waited. One person, right now. Brendan looked around the theater. Nobody met his eyes. Olivia stared at the floor. Jeremy examined his script. The crew members found reasons to look at their equipment. I don't remember specific names, Brendan finally said, but multiple people mentioned concerns. You're lying. Gerald's voice was flat. You made it all up because you wanted more stage time. And I believed you because I didn't verify the information. That's on me, but the lies are on you. I didn't lie. Get out. Gerald pointed toward the exit. You're fired from the production. Effective immediately. You can't fire me. We're 2 weeks from opening. Watch me. Leave now or I'll have security escort escort you out. Brendan stood there for 10 seconds, looking at the cast like someone might defend him. Nobody moved. This is unbelievable, he said. You're going to destroy the show over some misunderstanding. The only thing destroying the show was you. Gerald walked to the edge of the stage. Leave, now. Brendan grabbed his bag from his seat and walked toward the exit. When he passed my row, he stopped. You're really going to let her ruin everything we've built? He looked at the cast. She's been a problem since day one. Out. Gerald's voice cut through the theater. If you say one more word, I'm calling the police for harassment. Brendan left. The door slammed behind him. The theater was completely silent. Gerald turned to me. I owe you an enormous apology. I should have verified the complaints before taking action. I let one person manipulate me into making terrible decisions, and you paid the price. I didn't trust my voice enough to respond. Your role is fully restored as of right now. All your original scenes are back in the show. We'll need to rehearse them, but we have time. Gerald addressed the rest of the cast. I also want to apologize to all of you. I created a toxic environment by not properly investigating the situation. If anyone has concerns about a cast member going forward, I need concrete examples, not gossip. He dismissed us for a 15-minute break before resuming rehearsal. Olivia approached me in the hallway. I'm really sorry. I should have questioned what people were saying instead of just going along with it. Jeremy walked over next. I feel like an idiot. I completely believed him. One by one, cast members apologized. Some were genuine, some felt performative, but they were apologizing, which was more than I'd gotten in weeks. Curtis found me by the prop table. I should have sent that screenshot sooner. I just didn't want to get involved, but that was the wrong choice. Why did you finally send it? Because I watched him take your scene yesterday and act like he deserved it. And I realized if I didn't say something, I was just as responsible. Curtis looked at the stage where Gerald was reorganizing the rehearsal schedule. I'm sorry it took so long. We ran through my restored scenes that afternoon. The blocking came back easier than I expected. The lines I'd been rehearsing in my car for weeks finally had a purpose again. Gerald gave me actual notes. Constructive feedback about pacing and projection, the kind of direction I'd been missing since this whole thing started. When rehearsal ended, he pulled me aside. I know an apology doesn't fix the damage, but I'm grateful you didn't quit. A lot of people would have. Opening night arrived faster than expected. 2 weeks of intensive rehearsals to restore everything Brendan had dismantled, but we made it work. I stood backstage before my first entrance, and for the first time in a month, nobody was whispering about me. The cast was focused on the show, the energy felt right, and my scenes were exactly where they belonged. My garden monologue in Act 2 landed perfectly. The audience was silent through the whole thing, and when I finished, someone in the third row actually gasped. That moment, the one Brendan had tried to erase, became the turning point of the entire show. After the final curtain call, a woman approached me in the lobby. She introduced herself as the director of a theater company across town. Your performance was remarkable. We're casting for our spring production, and I think you'd be perfect for the lead role. Would you be interested in auditioning? I took her card, the lead role, in a professional production at a real theater company. Gerald caught up with me before I left. You earned this. Every bit of it. I drove home with the woman's card on my passenger seat and my script in the back. The role that almost disappeared had become the one that got me noticed. Brendan had tried to steal my opportunity, but in the end, he just made it bigger. The spring production started rehearsals 3 weeks later, and I walked into that theater as the lead. No politics, no sabotage, just the work I'd wanted to do from the beginning. Brendan never worked in community theater again. Word spread fast about what he'd done, and no director wanted that kind of liability in their production. Curtis texted me after opening night of the spring show. Saw the reviews. You killed it. Glad I finally did the right thing. I didn't respond immediately, but eventually I sent back, thanks for the screenshot, because without that proof, I'd still be fighting accusations I couldn't defend against. Sometimes the truth needs evidence, and sometimes people surprise you by finally choosing to provide it.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop your favorite part in the comments. See you in the next one.